Dude, yeah, we're starting the show literally.
Oh,
Just a little bit.
okay.
What's up, Ben Standig? This is me, Ben Standig. That's Bobby Bancroft. We are doing the first edition of the College Basketball Live here on DMV Stream. We are, I guess we have to introduce ourselves because we're going to be doing this every week. We want you guys to keep coming back. So I guess the deal is we are, for the most part, college basketball beat writers in the area. As you can tell by the lovely mascot behind us, we are currently at Georgetown at McDonough Arena. We just finished covering practice. That's the kind of guys that we are. We have that type of access.
We believe this is the first ever non-Georgetown video stream from Georgetown, so we feel pretty good about that.
Certainly, yeah, from outsiders, I guarantee you, no outsiders have ever done this before. So this is kind of groundbreaking stuff. So here's the deal. So like I said, we cover Georgetown, Maryland, Mason, GW. We do the Wizards as well, and the hope is that we'll take that information that we get and we'll pass it along to you guys. Yada yada yada, and we'll talk here. We talk on Twitter at Ben Standig. What are you?
It's hard to remember. At Bobby Bancroft.
That is a tough one to remember. And the plan is we'll be here every week. So, is that enough of an intro?
I think we've spoken too much.
All right, fair enough. All right, so we just got done covering Georgetown. They've got a game Friday against Cincinnati, a team that they have lost to 4 straight times. But before we get to the Bearcats, what up with the Hoyas? Honestly, I mean, let's be honest here. They start Big East 0-2. They lose Greg Whittington. Did you think 9 games later we'd be sitting here, them in second place, having won 8 out of 9?
No, I had them playing Maryland in the NIT a couple weeks ago, which would have actually been about the only time NIT was an interesting matchup for Georgetown. They.
Seriously, actually, wouldn't that be like if I told you right now that actually could happen? Would you be willing to be like, yeah, fine, let's let that happen?
No.
Okay. I tried to sell it. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mark. They. It's one of those things where they had to change the way they played, and I think, even thinking Winnington was going to be part of the team, which he's not, second leading rebounder, scorer, people were talking about maybe even an NBA type, player. The Pittsburgh loss, after the game, we were all looking, everyone was diving into the corners, going through the media book, trying to, worst loss since when, is that kind of a night? And you think, they can't keep winning games 40-41, and, in that manner, 37-36. Tennessee, they're going to have to change the way that they played, higher tempo. I know that was your thing since maybe the first game of the season, but they did it, and, they had to do it without Greg, and I think it got the process going quicker. The idea of playing with more guards in the court. There's a reason teams don't play with 4 forwards, and we're seeing some of the fruits come from that.
The one thing that's, I mean, I guess the 2 things that have been surprising. One, the defense has been good all year. That JT Free will tell you that they've been living on that. But Greg Whittington is also, in theory, the best individual defensive player. The defense has been strong. John Thompson III said after this last game against Marquette that the defense they need to work on. Mind you, it was a game where Marquette still only shot 42%. Georgetown was comfortably ahead by 8 to 10 points the whole second half. So
because they were forcing steals and they were turning the ball over. Right. Marquette was shooting well, but they weren't getting a lot of shots.
Right, they had 19 turnovers. I think it was like 24. It was like 24 points I think for Georgetown. So the fact that also their rebounding has been a lot better. I don't remember the exact number, but like through non-conference play, they were basically flat in rebounding, which considering how many of those long woody type opponents they were playing, that's a pretty terrible stat. But they've actually been pretty good even going with the 3 guards because guys like Devonta Smith are there.
That's the biggest, that's I think the biggest change is that you've got to replace Greg, and Thompson said we're going to look at we're going to look at stats, we're going to look at rebounds, we're going to look at points. He said the defense, and that's what Georgetown was doing. They're sort of almost like the Florida State. If you follow college basketball, they were becoming that sort of a team, just trying to grind you out. And DSR, who we've talked to him, he likes to be called that. It's not just us. His rebounding production out of a 6'3" reserve guard is just you can't really expect that. And it's one of those things where some guys just have it, and he has it rebounding. Also, helps them other times. He can miss 10 shots in a row, like in Louisville, 1 for 10. He's going to keep shooting the next time he takes it. And Georgetown needs a guy like that. The idea of sharing the ball and all those kinds of things. But
well, the one thing that sort of jumped out to me, you mentioned the pace before, and you're right. That was my. I think I asked a question about pace like 5 press conferences in a row. It became my my thing. But
You weren't here last week. You were at GW,
right.
and that was the first thing that started out. And he said, "Oh, well, Ben's not here. There's no case questions."
Well,
it's your baby.
And I will absolutely take it because I will say that was a definite turning point for me. But I think another one that I've noticed lately, and it sort of goes with the same point. Part of my issue with the pace is that it feels like Georgetown typically, not just this year but over the years, if a team wants to play fast, they will play fast. If a team wants to play slow, they will play slow. It's not that they couldn't win at either level, but it often felt like they weren't willing to dictate the terms of the game, even if they felt they were the better team. They were allowing the other teams to decide how the game would be played. But I've kind of felt over this stretch, especially the last few games, they have been dictating more to the opponent what they're going to do. I mean, Marquette, it kind of felt like the way Georgetown was switching with their defenses. They've been playing a lot more zone without Whittington. This game they played a little bit more man because Williams said as much after the game. It kind of felt like Georgetown was saying to Marquette, okay, this is how this game is going to be played tonight. And Marquette, obviously they couldn't live up to it. So to me, the whole notion of I feel like lightning is going to strike me if I said the Princeton offense in this building.
Yeah, don't.
But the general principles of that type of offense named after an Ivy League school has a read and react quality. And I feel that lately, regardless of what offense they're playing, they've been more, like I said, they've been dictating more to the other team.
I think, too, the idea of, in basketball, especially college, you need your guards to take over. It seems like since Greg has gone down, not gone down, but he's not in the lineup anymore, Markel is taking more of a role as far as, he's doing different things. And I know that we brought it up, the idea of, last year Jason Clark, he was All-Met Player of the Year, and he was a great 4-year guard here. I think right now, Markel is. Last year I wouldn't have even imagined, but he's a bigger part of this team. It seems like Jason was last season, and it seems almost like once Greg went down, they had to find, all right, what's Plan B? I mean, he's inserted himself more. Otto, who JT3 refers to as a guard. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
No.
He's shooting 3-pointers like a guard. I would agree with that. But those two guys are taking over, and in basketball, that's what you need more so than let's try and just get the best shot of your possession. Your best players have to step out, and that's what's happening here. And a big surprise, maybe 16 moves.
By the way, I was just thinking as we're talking, we introduced our names, but we didn't actually introduce like where we do anything because people want to actually read our stuff.
Oh, okay.
So let me just say that like I do a lot of stuff for CSN Washington, and I do a weekly, for the most part, college basketball poll, local and national writers. This guy is one of the ones that chimes in. And this week, the subtopic was the most interesting players in the DMV. But interesting, I left open to interpretation, whatever. But for Georgetown, Mark Starks was one of the guys I wrote, not only because of all the reasons talked about on the court, how well he's been playing. He's also easily the biggest character that's come through here in a while.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. He's definitely he's one of the rare players YouTube worthy. If Georgetown posts their post-game videos, you should definitely
they do. They do a really good job with that.
We should tell that to the SIDs. They appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I'm not on the payroll yet, so
not yet. But anyway, Markel Starks, he's definitely been much improved. I wrote a couple weeks ago basically that I think at this point he probably has more responsibility than Jason Clark, Austin Freeman, or Chris Wright. Not saying he's better than them, but in terms of what he's forced to do, he probably has more responsibility because, like you were saying, I mean, he's had more guard help now, but he almost has to be on the floor. Austin and Chris had each other. Jason was with them for a few years also, and he kind of almost has to be.
Well, not to cut you off. I'll do it again too. But it just sort of seems like I think he's a point guard. They don't really have a backup point guard. We actually just came from talking to the guys before practice. During the Reckless broadcast, the announcers Bob Wenzel was saying he's not a point guard. I asked him. He was smiling before I even got the question out because he'd obviously heard it. He considers himself a point guard. I consider himself a point guard. Do you consider himself a point guard? Well, you consider him. I don't know about yourself.
To an extent, I think the way we talked about it before, you described him as a scoring point guard. And I guess ultimately, I mean, I'm in my head, a point guard is a distributor. He's not the only one. There's as we talked about some of the other teams. This isn't the only team that quote unquote doesn't have a distributing point guard. Lots of teams don't. But yes, to some degree, I think the thing with him, I would almost say, is maybe it isn't so much the distributing as it is the leadership quality. I mean, it's pretty clear because Otto is especially off the court such a mild-mannered guy. Markel has an attitude that he definitely takes more of the control of the offense. And since this team doesn't have that sort of true high post guy with the ball in front of
I
him,
think he called him a silent assassin. I'm not sure if you were with us.
I didn't miss that.
Yeah, Markel, what's that?
I missed that.
Yeah, I mean Markel was just a quote. A minute, you can't step away. He called Otto the silent assassin.
Good to know. Let's talk about Cincinnati. I think what's interesting to me about this game, Cincinnati has been kind of this year for the most part in the Big East.
They're not going to be ant Friday night. I'm positive.
Right. But the thing that's interesting about this is, and we talked about this earlier in the week, Georgetown, you go back and look, when they started 0-2, to some degree, the Pittsburgh game was stunning by in terms of how bad the loss was.
Right, but the result wasn't.
Right. They've lost to Pittsburgh several times in a row, and I think it's like 5 out of 7 or 6 out of 8 games going back to 2007. Marquette is a team that they have at least at most sort of gone 50-50 with, as they did this year.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, they've lost 4 straight, and there's a certain quality.
6 out of 7.
And especially with Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, similar type teams historically speaking, in that they want to muck it up, grind it out, play physical. And Georgetown, if you look at patterns of teams they haven't played that well against, it's been that. And so what I'm kind of
West Virginia used to be in that group as well. Yeah.
So what I'm interested in is beyond how good this particular Cincinnati is, assuming that they're going to sort of play the same kind of game, is does Georgetown show that they've had legitimate improvement? This isn't the way they've been over the years, and they get this game get this done, or have these wins recently? Not that they're not impressive all the same, but maybe they just came up against good teams that they're good against. For example, Louisville's a very good team, but Georgetown has beaten them 3 times in a row. They have a good track record against them. So, how do you kind of see this thing?
Well, I think we were there last year. We were in Madison Square Garden for the Big East tournament. They lost the overtime thriller. Nancy Gates is gone, so they're the best rebounding team, I believe, in the Big East, but they're doing it by committee.
I looked at JT3 asked if we knew that stat, and I looked it up in the press conference and I forgot to tell him.
Yeah,
but yes,
I actually saw you doing that. It's going to be one of those games where Georgetown runs the very not Princeton offense, but precision offense with lots of really hard cuts and that. And if you are able to sort of bump them off that, grab a little bit, the refs don't call foul every time. Do they have a plan B? Can they go out and out rebound them? The idea of they're a tough team. Usually toughness means rebounding. Can you go in? Can you limit them to one shot? Cincinnati doesn't shoot very well. I think we're going to see a lot of zone unless Wright gets hot and deep.
I'm just glad Nancy Gates is gone.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it was so painful last year to watch that unfold the way that it did.
Right. Especially because Mikhail Hopkins, if you don't notice, is an undersized center, so that would not be a particularly good matchup. But yeah, we don't have to worry about that specific one. Somebody opened the door behind us.
It's going to happen when you're live on location.
Exactly. You never know what's going to happen on live air. Let me test you. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, I think the idea of since the conference and the is so big and the matchups are different, they only play them once. It's at Cincinnati. It's a Friday night. Markel Starks gave a couple good quotes saying that just the way that they press, the crowd gets into it. It's a dark building. He said it feels like there's 100 people on the court. I don't know how he's going to break the press against that, but
he just played a game against Marquette where Buzz Williams was on the close contact, so he should have had a little some practice.
Yeah, coming to half court the one time, not going to get technical foul. That's an interesting question for Mr. Carl Hess. But this is absolutely a measuring stick for Georgetown. Can they get it done? Absolutely. Will they get it done? I don't know.
We're gonna, we still got a few more weeks to go before we get into Big East tournament, the NCAA tournament, so we'll have lots of time to discuss what it all means for Georgetown, because obviously on a lot of levels, I don't dismiss the regular season at all, but in the back of everybody's mind is what's going to happen in the postseason. They've not had tremendous success.
They sort of broke through a little bit last year. It was important, I think, to get out of the first round.
Yeah.
Even as a 3 seed.
Oh, by the way, we should also say that we asked today, one of the reporters asked John Thompson today about Greg Whittington, about his chance of coming back. The response was simply slim. So I don't suspect he's coming back. We don't.
You never know. Syracuse just got somebody back.
That is true. That is a good point.
One of the more expected results of the Big East season, I believe, went the Orange's way.
So it's hard. I think this year with the NCAA tournament in general, it's incredibly wide open. You could take 30 teams and project them to the Final Four. But just in terms of where Georgetown is, how does this, from a big picture standpoint, does this feel different to you than in the years past, or we just can't
tell? There's a couple things that feel a little bit different. They don't have what you would consider.
By the way, this is my Marco Rubio moment. I'm gonna have a drink on there.
It feels a little bit different in the fact that they're not running the true Princeton offense, if you want to call that, where the center is basically the point guard. That's not what's going on here. That might be a little bit of a negative for the way they want to operate, but the positive would be that they've got a true superstar that's been taking over recently. I think that's the most important part. I mean, you go back even to Roy Hibbert, when they lost to Davidson. He was in foul trouble, couldn't really take over. Greg Monroe wasn't able to. Austin and Chris, they lost to VCU in Chicago. I was there for that. Otto Porter, I don't know how old you are when you're watching this. Ben likes to refer to them as Otto and the Miracles, Reggie and the Miracles from '87. They got all the way to Elite Eight. It's got that kind of a feel. And now Mark, people keep saying, Greg Winnington's down. He was their second best player. Well, the question, was he? Maybe it's Mark Starks. So they seem like they've got a couple guys that could lead them, and that's where I think I feel even better about them getting to the second weekend. Which I feel once you get to the second weekend, it's everyone's good, and it's just a matter of who gets the breaks at that time. So I think that they've got a legitimate shot to make the second weekend, which is not something I felt about 2 months ago, even at full strength.
Not that any team could afford to be without their best player, but I think in this case, foul trouble, I think, we want to discuss injuries, but foul trouble, if Otto were to be in significant trouble for any of the games, then I think it would be a different story. I mean, against Rutgers, Lubick, essentially their second best front court player, he got into foul trouble, had nothing of a game, and they won, but they did struggle to a bit. I mean, Mikhail Hopkins did step up.
And it just depends what kind of team they're playing when that game happens. If you're playing a team that's got a very strong front court, and Lubick gets in trouble. And if they're playing a team like VCU that almost plays 5 guards, it wouldn't be as big of a deal, obviously. But
all right, I think we've hammered Georgetown. I mean, in theory, we could. I was thinking about how to describe ourselves before there was a Beavis and Butthead mentioned, but I think realistically, I would probably say
I want to be Stewart. If that's
that's the guy with the winger.
The guy that wears the winger.
I will have to get to that. I was thinking, well, basically this is what we do. This is like Kornheiser and Wilbon, but with hair and no money.
It's like a G-list version of that locally.
Right. All right. So we talked about Georgetown. Like I said, we do this plenty. Oh, I because I'm terrible at this, I forgot to mention. So he writes for 106.7, the online component.
CBSDC, CBS local, yeah. CBSDC.
Is that really what it is?
Yeah.
I was right. It was 106.7, but I guess
you can do that. It's both. If you Google the website, it comes up CBSDC.
Awesome. All right. So I say we go to a different.
We both freelance for the Associated Press.
That is correct as well.
Can't hype that?
No, that's a very important point, especially now that they give us bylines. So.
Yeah, and neither of us have ballots, but the local writer Kevin Dunning that does. I like to feel like I try and influence them.
And more importantly, not only is he an AP voter, he's also a voter in the CSN,
which is
poll.
Yeah, that's
much more important. And he blurbs on that one. So that's.
I think he's told me it's really close as far as what's more important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little disappointed it's close to be honest. All right. I say we veer off of Georgetown now. We could do potpourri here. The teams after Georgetown in the poll, so we just did top 5. Honestly,
did you tell them the top 5?
I didn't. That's what I was going to go through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last year we did top 8, and realistically that was ridiculous. Ooh. Top 5 this year is even a little bit tough. I think at the beginning of the year it looked like it could be a little more balanced, but
it looked like finally it wasn't just going to be the Georgetown.
That was the reason. I didn't even do the poll in the beginning of the season because last year was Georgetown essentially every week. This year I was like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Maryland got off to that great start. It was looking like the balance was shifting.
The first week VCU was number 1, and then since then it's gone the other way. VCU was number 2, followed by Virginia, followed by Maryland, followed by Towson. I can't say that I voted for Towson, and they've subsequently lost, but that sort of shows. You could argue a few teams for the 5th spot, but more to the point, it's getting a little thin there. Well, let me go back to the top. VCU 2, Virginia 3. I believe think there were however many 12 or 13 people voted. I think everybody had VCU second except for one person who I believe is sitting to my left.
Yeah, I went with the Wahoos. I think UVA had a week.
Would you care to defend your position that nobody else agreed with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on how familiar you are with Tony Bennett, he's sort of this year's team particularly, which I saw live at George Mason first game. They lost their own 3 against the CAA, which is not something to brag about, but that's something there. They're 7-3 in the ACC. They traveled to Maryland, which is a game Maryland really, really needed. UVA was able to, to get away from them. And they're playing like one of those Washington State teams that he had. And they're adding some athleticism involved with that. Justin Anderson, I feel like, is sort of, he's the game changer. I feel like he's coming along. I saw him play in high school a lot, AAU, and, those types of things. And I really feel like they're disciplined, they're hard to score on, and all of a sudden they're scoring. Watch out. Joe Harris, Anderson, I mean,
That's to me what's interesting. I mean, Virginia, like you said, Tony Bennett, we kind of know exactly what they're going to be. Hard-nosed, defensive there. I think last time I looked, it wasn't this week, but they were like second in the country in scoring defense. That's pretty much where you're always going to find them.
Right.
But what seems to be different lately is they're actually putting up some points. It's not enough, like we talked about before Georgetown. You can't every game stay in the 50s and expect to consistently win because one game the defense isn't going to be perfect or the other team's going to make some shots or whatever. And they've actually been putting up some points.
Yeah, they've gone, they had a very disappointing loss to Georgia Tech where they were up by 9. Talking to one of my friends is a big UVA donor, and we just couldn't be more upset. And then they've gone and they beat Clemson, they beat at Maryland, Virginia Tech, and they scored 73, 78, 80 points. I mean, who are these guys?
Right.
And I just feel like, I had a simulator for them in DCU. I feel like I'm going Cavs.
Just to go back to Justin Anderson for a minute, I mean, I totally agree. He's completely not what you're a Virginia.
I can't believe he went there.
Right. I mean, he was, for those that don't know, he was going to Maryland. He had signed with Maryland when Gary Williams was there. When Gary retired and Turgeon came in, he decided to bail. Maryland kept McFadden, but he left.
It was a soft verbal, apparently.
However those things go, he took off, and yeah, definitely not the kind of that you want to go. But one thing I was going to mention with him is that I'm not remotely comparing him to Robert Griffin III, but what I will say is that I talked to Justin Anderson last year when he was at Montrose Christian, and his maturity is just ridiculous. I mean,
you mean like talking to him? I mean, I feel like he has. I think I wrote a comment. I don't know if he published it. He has an NBA body.
Well, then
there's 3
yeah.
guys. I remember asking Montrose Christian guys, "What are you guys doing in the weight room?" Because him and Carrera and Wainwright. I mean, those guys all look like they could play.
And Larson is huge. I mean, he could.
Right. Well, these other guys are more chiseled variety.
But no, I mean, yes, there's that part of it. But I saw just even like, I mean, the way that RG3 sort of charmed everybody in this town. Like if Justin Anderson had that level of platform, I think he could almost be that kind of guy. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how he develops over the years. If he, I never assume anybody stays at school longer than 10 minutes anymore. But
he doesn't seem like a guy that would be 4 years because he's going to be good enough to leave.
Right, and I mean, Virginia, unless they were to get in, say, top 10, they probably won't have a true national platform, but he could be a guy to really keep an eye on as far as a breakout star, not just on the court, but sort of as a guy that people gravitate towards. I think he's interesting. VCU, and I think we kind of know what the deal is there.
Yeah, they are. What do you thought they were?
What do we call it? Havoc?
Havoc.
Yeah, that's a good word.
You don't want to go to war with the Rams.
I pretty much would say that, like, taking out personal, emotional attachments aside, they're probably my favorite team because I just love watching them go at it. They have all those little guards that just interchangeable. It sort of reminds me of the way John Thompson Jr. had his team, where you didn't know who was on the court at any minute. Just a lot of different guys, and they just chase and chase and chase.
Yeah.
They had that little downturn, but they lost a couple games in a row, but they've come back since.
They're definitely playing the strengths of their roster. I think they have a 7-footer. Haley doesn't really play that much anymore. But it just seems like there's going to be one of those nights where they can't make threes, and it's just like, during their tournament run, I remember Jay Billis, he got a lot of flack for saying they shouldn't make it, and they made the Final Four. He stood by his position that they shouldn't have made it, and he pointed out, well, you don't pick teams based on what you're going to shoot 12% better from 3 during a 5-game period, or 6, I guess they were in 6 games. So the way they play is a little bit scary in that regard. But as long as the poor shooting night doesn't hurt the defensive effort, They should. I don't know. Talking about Georgetown getting second again. I don't see any reason, no matter what their seed is, VCU couldn't do that as well.
I think what's going to be interesting to see how they are all these next few games. They just beat Charlotte the other day, and I think that started a stretch of 6 straight games where they're playing teams with winning records in the A10.
Yeah.
The A10, I guarantee you ask a general person that still the Big East is better. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but the A10 is a very, very good league this year. So to face those amount of teams that face GW this weekend, GW is a good team, an up and coming team, so it's not going to be an easy game for them. But it'll be interesting to see how they go. I don't think they play Butler until March.
Yeah, I don't have their schedule memorized.
Really? What have you been doing with yourself?
I've just got George Mason and Georgetown. I'm just more of the Georges. But, people sort of, the idea of, conference realignment hasn't been very basketball, related, but, their move was obviously only basketball related. And they're in a better league than they have been. I mean, that is a big deal. They're coming up a stretch where you didn't get that in the CAA. No disrespect to the CAA. You can make a Final Four in the CAA. We've seen that. Why not this year? But we have seen it happen.
If that happened this year, that would be a bigger deal than what happened the other 2 times.
Well, if you look at bracket projections, I know you don't like those too early. It's about a month away. The CAA champions are like 15 seed. There was 3 teams in the tournament in the CAA 2 years ago.
By the way, according to one of our voters, Mr. Rich Dubrow, that's who's in Baltimore.
Oh yes.
The VCU plays Butler March 2nd.
Okay.
So assuming he's correct, we have to wait for them for that.
Where?
I'm gonna say it's at VCU, but don't.
Okay, because Georgetown plays at 9 o'clock that night. The dreaded Saturday night 9 p.m. Rutgers hit.
Yeah. That is dreaded.
I mean, what's the like?
I don't know. All right, but in general, I think those 3 teams. I think at this point Georgetown has distinguished itself atop. I'm sort of with you. Virginia's been interesting enough to me lately that I wouldn't really argue.
The problem is they've just got bad losses. There's no way to hide from that.
But I think with that said, I think as it stands now, and I admit I'm not. It's not that I don't look at the bracket projections. I just don't see these things change so quickly. I don't know why people get worked up about war or somebody is right this moment. But with that said, those 3 teams I'm assuming are pretty much in brackets. Maryland, on the other hand, is one of the schools that is not in. And I don't quite. There's still enough games. I'm sure if they beat Duke and so on, they could get there. But I'm kind of thinking that losing Virginia at home, combined with some other losses, is really putting them behind the proverbial 8 ball, especially since in the non-conference they beat nobody. The best win was basically George Mason.
That's the problem. They just, I don't know if it's Turgeon's schedule or if he thought his team wasn't prepared for the kind of non-conference they needed, or they just couldn't get the games. But they just they were 13-1, I think, 12-1, 14-1. And people say, well, why aren't they ranked? Well, this is the reason. They just whether it's they didn't get a great draw on the Big Ten ACC Challenge. George Mason's, like I said, they're down. They just it doesn't seem like they've got enough firepower to get to where they need to get. It's like 1 year away, and I know you covered some of the games this year. I did the BB&T, but they're about a year away. Of course, in college basketball, it's sort of fool's gold because that's contingent on Alex Len staying on campus.
Yeah, I don't think anybody assumes that that's going to happen. I could make the argument that Otto Porter stays. I really can't make the argument that Alex Len goes. And especially we're recording this show on Wednesday. Nerlens Noel, the center from Kentucky, who was
almost came here.
I wouldn't go.
Until he went to the barbershop.
Is that what it is?
Well, he got the UK.
Yes. I thought you meant he went to the barbershop here. I was like, what? Did something happen?
No.
But yeah, so most draft boards, again, light draft, but Nerlens Noel sort of was the guy sitting at the top of draft board. Alex Len now probably got to be the first or second guy, regardless of whether he is or not. He's probably going to leave, and like you said, if Maryland, quote unquote, is a year away, they're going to have to do that, whatever's going to happen next year, without a 7-footer who's got a lot of skills. And
they could do it though. Just the way I was talking about Otto Porter stepping up and sort of being the guy here that's like, you got that guy.
It's just
Wells sort of seems to me like he could be that guy for them. So
he's beast.
Being a year away, yeah, it's contingent on Len, but I could see them just getting better. I think Roddy Peters comes in.
He has a lot of young guys. I think just to I haven't followed Maryland as much as I have historically, but what I've certainly seen enough, not just this year, but over the years. And one thing that sort of stands out to me this year is I also cover the Wizards, and the Wizards have had about 15, 16 different starting lineups this year.
Yeah.
But you kind of understand why, because they've had so many injuries, and also they were horrific for a good chunk of the year. Maryland's had like 12 or 13 different starting lineups without a ton of injuries of any significance. And
is that like something he did at Texas A&M, or do you not know?
I don't know. I mean, I think part of the problem is they haven't had their point guard situation's been pretty abysmal most of the year.
Yeah.
They're trying to search how to solve that. They have a good front court and feel like they can't figure out how to get the ball inside enough consistently to Lamb and some of the other guys. But what stands out, I mentioned before with the interesting player part in the poll this week.
Yeah.
I wrote something about Maryland, and I said Nick Faust was the most interesting guy for them. But I said it in a slightly negative way. Interesting because he came in with a lot of hype, and he's shown flashes. You can see
it was a big deal that he decided to stick with them. I remember it was
huge.
like, I think Arizona was sniffing around. I mean, there was some really big schools sniffing around. You're like, wow, the guy must be good. He must be.
Well, plus they had just lost Anderson.
Yeah.
So if they had lost him too, that would have been a really bad start. I think what sort of tying in with the starting lineup is it feels like Turgeon, he's been tweaking so much. I wonder if it's almost to some long-term detriment, because the problem is, like, it's one thing if you take a player and say, hey, I need you to do this tonight, but he hasn't established himself as anything. I don't know what he really is yet. He's in theory a wing guard, but he's not really a wing guard. They played him a lot at point even last year, but he's not really good at that. His shooting has kind of been.
You think if Maryland fans out there, is that what you want to see? I mean, to me, that would feel like, well, he's trying to win. And he's not, saying this is what we're going to do things. He's saying, look, we'll try and win this way. We'll try and win that way. I'd say that to a certain extent, that'd probably be a positive. I think if I were a Maryland fan.
Well, so to tie it in back to the Wizards thing. So earlier this year, I don't know how many people paid that much attention to the Wizards when they were playing horrible, but Emeka Okafor was asked to take on a lot of responsibility. He's the highest paid player on the team. He's obviously been around for a long time. We all know who he is. He was. Emeka, if you're watching, I apologize. He was terrible the first couple months of the year.
It's hard to be good when you're 0-12. To be fair.
Right, but part of the
no, I mean to him, not to your point.
Fair enough. But like part of the problem with him was that, so he wasn't putting up consistent stats at all. He was getting yoked in and out of the lineup. The first game of the year, he didn't play in the fourth quarter. But anyway, lately, the last month or so, he's been really good. He had a stretch where he was down a double-double like almost every night, and we asked him, what's up with him? What changed for you? And he basically said that one of the problems he had early in the year was never quite knowing what his role was. He never quite knew when he was coming into the game, coming out of the game, etc. And so if he's saying that, a guy who was the best player in college, won a national title, was the number 2 pick, and he's been around for what? He's saying that, then what is a 19-year-old like Nick Faust? I mean, not that every person is the exact same. You almost have to think for a college kid not knowing. We've talked about this in Georgetown too. When you kind of have certain guys who don't get in the lineup, you don't know when you're going to play. It's hard to stay consistent. So that's what I'm saying with Faust. He's a good player. I just kind of would like to see Turgeon say, you know what, you're doing this, and that's where we're going to go until you establish that, and I'll figure out the rest with other people.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And so it looks like we're leaving Maryland right now. I'd say there's a next 4. There may be like in like the next 4, so like the next 8. It's more towards the bottom, but good news. College basketball is crazy. Kentucky looks like they might not make it anymore now. I mean, it's not just based on what one team does; it's all the other teams do. Now, transitioning from your point about not knowing who's playing and how that affects you, I think that's George Mason's problem. I cannot figure out what they're going to do from game to game. They've got good coaches over there. They had a good year last year, 24-9. They chose not to play in one of those. No offense to Pitt, they won the CBI, but that's a hokey tournament. CBI, CIT, it's NCAA, NIT. Just go home, okay? The season's over. Someone turn the lights out. But I can't figure out what they're doing. They sort of remind me of old Georgetown teams. And I didn't watch a lot of Paul Hewitt at Georgia Tech. I don't necessarily cover the ACC a ton. They sort of play like that, where it's JT2 is just taking guys in and out. One game, Paris Bennett's playing 25 minutes, and he's a big part. Next game, he doesn't play. Holloway from all the 6 I think he's one of the best shooters in this area. So he seems instant offense. Right can't get it going. He should be the guy. Sometimes he doesn't. Like, I can't figure out what they're doing.
And he said as much. I can't
Yeah, he
remember,
did.
like 2 or 3 weeks ago, he flat out said after a game that he probably plays too many guys to his own detriment. That's just what he likes to do. And I'm basically quoting him right there.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, if you know that, then I think the difference between the Georgetown analogy is true. The difference is that
they were better at defense.
Well, also they would have an anchor like Patrick Ewing and David Wingate or Reggie Williams, and they had 3 or 4 guys that would play a lot and sort of rotated the rest. And here, except for Sherrod Wright, everybody, there's nobody else who's really consistent. Now, Jonathan Arwood has been picking up his game a lot lately.
Yeah.
And that's best, but the guard play has just been inconsistent, and I agree with you. Holloway seems like he should be playing more on a team that needs more offense. Eric Copes, maybe he's injured, maybe his hip injury.
Sophomore slump type of deal. It seems like he was on pace to set George Mason block records last year, and say the defense is usually ahead of the offense. We're almost on the sophomore year, and it seems to be that way still. I think Hewitt's quote going even more into it was something. It's hard to get when guys only play a limited amount of time. It's just very natural. He wasn't calling out any of his players. It's very natural to think once you get in, if I make this basket, it's going to make me play. It's going to give me more time rather than whatever the team defensive techniques that they need. And they've really. Last year was my first year covering them, and Morrison and Pearson and Cornelius were such a big part of that team, and it's a little surprising the depths that they've sort of fallen this year without VCU even being in the league.
It's definitely been. It's definitely been disappointing. Going not even that long ago, like into the season at the end of non-conference play, I think almost anybody who at that point was reassessing the CAA said George Mason was the favorite at that moment. Now Northeastern had injuries at the beginning of the year, and now they've kind of run away out. We don't need to deal with them, but there's reasons why maybe that George Mason isn't in front, but they've had some losses where you're like, what is going on here?
And it's an interesting conference where because they have unlike most major conferences, their rule is if you're leaving, you're not eligible for the tournament, and they also have some APR issues with Towson and UNC Wilmington, so it's going to be a 17 tournament. So you figure, for maybe, I don't know if mid-major is the right word or not, they're not a top 6 conference or whatever, but the idea that, you finish first, you get the automatic NIT bid. And I think last year, that would have been a big deal for them. It would be a big deal this year, but they're not going to get there. But hey, it's 3 days in Richmond, winner take all. You only win 3 games.
No, that's going to be pretty interesting to see how that, because there's definitely a couple teams there where I could see easily getting on a little roll, and I guess, for argument's sake, they're one of them.
And Towson's one of them too, but they're not even eligible.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
sorry, Darrell Bauman.
Yeah, we're in Darrell Bauman's old home right now.
To go back to the rotation thing, I've talked to GW coach Mike Lonergan a bunch this year, and
very surprised.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But,
that's your guy.
I don't know.
Lonergan's your guy.
He's been very nice to me. I'll agree with that much. But one thing, so they started about a month ago. They went to a 4 freshman lineup. They were at that point the only team in the country doing that. I believe Army is now going 5 freshmen, but I could be wrong. But anyway, so GW started 4 freshmen, and he didn't. What Lonergan said was he didn't do it necessarily. He was starting 3 to begin with. Patricio Guarino, who I think I talked to some people who think he's down line to be an NBA player, Argentinian. Joe McDonald from Landon, and Kevin Larson went to Montrose Christian. He added Keith and Savage from Episcopal also, but the reason he said he did it wasn't so much because he wanted the novelty of 4 freshmen or that he thought that was certainly the best league to win at the moment, but he has veteran guys on the bench, guys that started a lot of games the last couple of years, because he felt that they were going to be. He likes bringing guys off the bench who can score, who are experienced, but also he wanted to get the freshmen in there so that they would off the bat get going. They wouldn't be sitting there waiting. When am I going to come in? When am I not going to come in? A lot of guys on the bench are playing more starter minutes than some of the freshmen, but he's doing it a different way, where he's on some level starting some of his bench off the bat.
It's like, Phil Jackson, you got to know who you can ride and who you need to be nice to. Well, some guys you got to know, can they handle the idea of I've started my whole life, now I'm not starting. So, if you can figure out who needs that, then you do it, even if you don't play a lot. Some guys need that to be in it, and it's working for them. Talk about Maryland being a year away. GW is definitely a year away, but they seem to really be on the uptick from last year.
No, I think starting the freshmen the way they have, obviously
Those guys aren't going early.
No, they obviously want to win this year, and their general basic goal is to make the Atlantic 10 tournament the main part of the tournament, which they have not done, I believe, in like 5 or 6 seasons at this point. That's their main goal. They're on track to
That's
do that.
rough.
Yeah, that's a tough way to go. But they're on track to they're on track to do that for sure. I was going to talk about the Wizards, but before we veer into the topic, do you have anything else to mention? I mean, and we should say, I mean, yes.
Well, I think talking about Mason, we're talking about Mason's struggles. The good part, homecoming weekend. Don't have a football team. Homecoming's basketball.
How does that work? Do they still have floats and stuff, or is that what my soul?
Haven't. That's more like an Animal House type homecoming.
Really?
Yeah.
When I went to college, we had a float. And I went to a college that didn't have football either.
Where'd you go?
UMBC, Home Retrievers.
No, I just wanted to get it out there. Yeah. I'm JMU guy. No, but last year I went and it was nice. You can't partake in certain things when you're covering a game, but I was at least around them and it was pretty cool. And I don't think it's gonna be that cold this weekend, but the entire parking lot is set up like a tailgate where you'd expect like you're going to a football game. It's a big game. They're not on the bubble. They're not on any sort of bubble right now, but they need to get the confidence up for those 3 days in Richmond that we're talking about. So we got nothing going on. Homecoming in Fairfax, Georgia State, Georgia Mason.
Bobby will be there, definitely. I'll probably be there.
I will be there. Tweet at me. I will find you on the parking lot.
Right,
cornhole. I will be playing cornhole before the game. It's gonna be great.
He will make appearances, take pictures with you, but I warn you in advance.
Kiss babies.
But if he takes pictures with you, he's gonna photobomb the picture, even when he's the main part of the picture. It's a show.
Everyone has a calling card.
As long as you know what it is. All right, let's talk Wizards because I cover them too much to not talk about them. The college
cover them a little bit.
Yes, you do. That's a fair point. But also, this sport is going to end before that one. We have to have something to talk about after April.
Right.
So let's just talk about the Wizards. I'm going to go.
You want to talk about the draft?
No. I'm going to go the complete opposite.
I know. I read it.
Read what?
You wrote about playoff possibilities.
Right. As I tweeted out, I said,
depending on like how crazy you are.
Right. In honor of Prince being on Green, I said, let's go crazy and talk about the Wizards in the playoffs. Now, it's on CSN Washington. Help me out with the clicks. But the more it's not going to. It's realistically, is it going to happen? Probably not. They're 10 games out of the last spot for the playoffs. Are 20 under 500. A lot would need to happen. But I would just simply say I'll just lay out my argument, and you can tell me how crazy I am if I need to pat it around. 10-7 since John Wall's come back.
Yeah.
And even with that, even that 17 games with John Wall, I mean, it's from the exact moment he came back. He didn't have a preseason or training camp.
Yeah.
So he was working his way back in shape, as were other guys who were just coming back. They were all trying to, they weren't together at any point in the season, so they were figuring each other out. Plus, in this stretch, Bradley Beal, who's really turned it on lately. He missed 5 games also.
Do you think John Wall sort of proved how valuable he was more by not playing almost? Is it one of those situations where
it would be hard to know? It's one of the big questions that's still out there as to what his value really is, and the Wizards are going to have to answer that question soon enough when it comes to contracts and max deals and such. But not only is it that, I mean, their defense has been really good all year. They're a top 10 defense pretty much all year. In the 17 games since John Wall's been back, they're the number 1 in the NBA in defensive rating, which is basically a points per possession type of stat. So they're getting it done, and also their shooting percentage has gone from like 40% to like 48% or close to that since he's been back. So it's really improved. But anyway, they're 10-7 with him now. 10-7. If you kept that pace going, that wouldn't get it done.
No.
But I would argue that hypothetically, for a reason we said, maybe they could get it. Let's say to 12-5.
How does winning 3 out of every 4 games do for them?
It does a lot. I mean, basically, in order to Milwaukee is the current 8th seed. They're 25-25 going into tonight. Which basically means
the Wizards are like 10 back.
Basically, the Wizards would have to go 26-6 to match that pace, which is obviously a lot going on. But I think they could at least make it interesting. When you look at the next 17 games, they played Detroit tonight, a team that beat them twice earlier this year. But I think they're better than Detroit. So let's just say they get going there. But when they come back from the break, 6 of their first 7 games are at home, and the Wizards are currently 8-1 in their last 9 home games. Then even when they go on the road, or not just on the road, but over the next games after that, they don't have a murderer's row schedule. I think Brooklyn's in there, but you're looking like Phoenix twice, Minnesota's in there, Philadelphia. Not a terrible. I think it's not. I think it's conceivable if what they're doing now is legitimately who they are, that they could go say 12-5.
Would that be bad though? Would it be? No, I think the idea of coming back and making the playoffs, that would be one of the greatest stories around.
Can you imagine from 0
especially when you consider where the Caps are, and this is not the hockey show, so we're not going to get into that. But
by the way, he does talk soccer a lot, so hypothetically we could go there, but I don't know. It's not my game. Anyway, go ahead.
It's the beautiful game. The idea of getting within striking distance of the playoffs and not making it, that hurts the draft, right? I mean, what pick are they locked into a top 3 pick right now? Well, I guess 4 would be you can't get locked in.
So right now, I think if the season ended, I think there would be the third, have the third most ping pongs. They've jumped Charlotte and they've jumped Orlando. But again, I mean, realistically, I don't see that.
I mean, I'm not trying to kill your happy vibes, but I'm just thinking of
our boy Ed Isaacson with the NBA draft blog. I tweeted out the other day something about
follow him for a good time.
Yeah, make sure you're in a happy mood. He said that basically if he could have sort of be entering the draft, he would rather be like say 15, he likes 15 to 40 better than the top 10 or so, because basically, as we discussed, this isn't a particularly good draft.
But now you can sort of steal Nerlens maybe.
That's definitely a possibility. Anyway, the larger thing is, I think if they have a good run here in these next 17 games, again, I'm not saying the odds of them making playoffs are pretty high, but I think if what they've been doing lately is legit, I think these next 17 games could make it interesting, or at least maybe they get into the discussion of, hey, maybe they could make the playoffs. We're not there yet. I'm just saying, I'd at least.
When I think of them picking around 17, 15, I think of Chris Singleton type vacancy. Ernie hasn't really shown that he's sort of. Well, I guess Vesely is a much earlier pick. He's like 5, right?
6, yeah.
Yeah, so there goes my theory. What do I know about the Wizards? I just covered them. Yeah, it'd be one hell of a story.
I have a different question. We have a timekeeper over here.
Yeah.
Do we know how long we've been talking?
Yeah, I do. A long time. We're actually fine. It's on the screen.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we should probably wrap.
Just talk for 5 hours.
Awesome. All right. Well, so we should probably wrap this up.
You've not been looking at it the whole time? I'm just like, oh.
I don't have my glasses.
Wow, we're going Wizards. We're going deep.
All right. Anyway, so we'll call it there.
Well, like since we're at Georgetown,
yeah.
And typically Coach Thompson is really good at giving non-committal answers about super important subjects.
Sure.
Let's actually try and let's put our foot down and say Friday prediction. Counting them out.
Georgetown, Cincinnati?
Yes.
I will say.
You can't just say there will be a winner and there will be a loser.
Well then there goes my
the game is the game. Those answers aren't going to cut it.
All right. I will say Cincinnati 60, Georgetown 62.
I like. There's no sort of like note to go along with it.
I will say Otto Porter is 2 something away from a triple double.
Okay. I'm gonna go steal. It's 2 steals.
It's possible.
I like. I like Georgetown to win 58, 51. I like for Markel Starks to show the world that he is in fact a point guard and have a 7, 8 assists. Yeah,
that would be.
I think my challenging and questioning his duties on the team is really gonna bring it in.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we will sign off. Appreciate you watching. We will. I don't know if we say work at the Kings because it seemed like it went out once we actually got started.
Yeah, it's just like 2 hours late.
Right. That's all. But we'll be back next week.
But you don't know where. We might be at George Mason. We might be at who knows.
Could be at GW.
Yeah, we're gonna be live on location to show you.
Could be at a random Starbucks near you too. You never know.
Georgetown staff has been just more than helpful tonight.
Agreed. All right. Until next time, Ben Standig, Bobby Bancroft. See you.
Thanks for coming on the show, Ben.